Outburst, a Todd Mills Mystery, Book 4. Author, R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher, Scribble Pub, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1998. Narrator, Eric Ost. Chapter 11. Examining the black cotton jacket, Chris stood in front of one of the mirrors at Dayton's, the grand department store that had done its best to keep the cities more or less in style since before the turn of the century. Wearing tall black boots that she'd bought from a transgender store she'd found on the net, tight black jeans, and a skimpy white top, Chris was the very picture of youth and, of course, lust. A hip Lolita, she mused with a grin. That was her goal. Yep, she kind of liked the way the jacket brought everything together. It had a kind of 60s kind of Beatles cut to it. Very mod. Straight arms, broad at the shoulders, cut in at the waist, then flared, which was good because it made her narrow hips, the weakest of her attributes, look broader and more feminine than they actually were. She could, she supposed, one day have hip augmentation if she wanted, but for now... Yes, it was only 8. The store would be open another hour and a half. She could keep looking, but this might do just fine. With it on, she looked cute and perky. A little waifish, perhaps, which never hurt, because the guys always liked that about her. But then she could just drop the coat, and as she now did, and there she was, in the tall boots, tight jeans, and sexy top. No bra. Her hormone-induced tits poking out as best they could, and her blonde hair all perked up. Yes, she thought, Stuart Hawkins would like it very much. He'd appreciate that she would come to his place all wrapped in a summer jacket that she could drop in an instant and then display everything great about her body. Oh, yes. She'd seen him only that one time, but she knew his taste, and she was it. He didn't like women. Nope. He wanted girls. The younger, the better. She'd sensed that as soon as their eyes had met over the canopies. Was sure of it as he pursued her throughout that great house and into the tool room, where they disappeared into a vortex of desire. She turned to the side, smoothed a wrinkle with her left palm, and smiled, still unable to believe that she'd actually passed, that Hawkins had been totally convinced. Okay, so her hands weren't so great. They were a little too broad, the fingers a shade too long. But there wasn't a thing to be done there, and besides, he hadn't picked up on them. Funny, she thought, now clasping her hands together. She hadn't expected to hear from Travis so soon, and when asked if she could help cater a private dinner party, she'd replied without too much thought, yeah, sure. Only after she'd agreed to the work, did she learn the specifics. Her heart flinched when she heard the name. Stuart Hawkins? Of course, she knew what this was all about. It had nothing to do with Travis's beautiful food. No, it had everything to do with her, with Chris, and lust. She hadn't been able to get that adorable boyish face out of her mind. That tall, manly figure, those broad shoulders, the pinstripe navy blue suit, his hot, moist mouth, the strong tongue. And as much as she'd hoped he'd forgotten her, that he'd dismissed their encounter as some stupid indiscretion, now she knew the truth. He'd been thinking of her all this time, too. So, did this mean this was it? The big romance she'd been wanting, searching for? Was he the one? No, of course she didn't want to have anything to do with a judge and slipping in and out the back door after midnight, for an important man like Hawkins could never be open about his relationship with a woman like Chris. Never. Some reporter would go digging and expose the pathetic muck of Chris's life. But if Stuart Hawkins really did love Chris, might he give it all up to pursue quite another dream, that of the two of them blissfully happy? So should she go? Should she really show up at his place for what could only prove to be a night of want, of unbridled passion? The very thought made her penis packed so tightly in her crotch, stir with desire. Horrified by so brutal a reminder of just who was who and what was what, Chris froze. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, bit her lower lip, and forced herself to think of cold water and mocking, laughing voices, and it worked. The penis was just an inflatable thing, and tucked beneath her spandex undies, which, of course, had been strategically reinforced. It thankfully began to shrink rapidly, so, in fact, glancing down over so carefully, she saw that she hadn't lost her feminine profile. Excellent. At least she thought she didn't have to deal with testicles, too. That was the one good thing about not having any, that she didn't have to push them up inside herself. But what the hell was she thinking? What kind of fantasy was she lost in? Of course, she couldn't go. They'd kissed down there in that tool room. They'd embraced, and when things had gotten gloriously overheated, the only way she'd been able to keep him from reaching between her legs and discovering her secret was by going down on him. But no, that wouldn't work again. Just as she dreamed of peeling every bit of clothing from that hunky body, so did he surely envision her naked and in his arms, and she knew that could never come to pass. The last time someone had discovered that, no, she really didn't have a vagina down there, had proved nothing less than disastrous. Never would she forget the look on that policeman's face. Nor would she forget how he had struck her, his fist cracking her jaw with such force that she was hurled back. Oh, God, she recalled that night, recalled scrambling for that gun, and him bellowing, "I'm gonna kill you, you fucking freak!" But of course, that wasn't how things had turned out. No, not at all. Chris started to cry. Her eyes swelled with sadness, for she knew that her secret dream, that of a man falling in love with her and the two of them tumbling into a wonderful, healthy relationship, was nothing more than a fantasy, a totally impossible one at that. A voice behind her exclaimed, "My God, that jacket fits you perfectly!" With the forefinger of her right hand, Chris quickly wiped away her tears, then turned around and said, Oh, thank you. "You've got to buy that," said the sales clerk, a young woman with straight brown hair and a big smile, outlined with bold red lipstick. "You look great in it." "Thanks," said Chris, slipping off the jacket. "But I can't get it. Not tonight, anyway." "Oh, come on." No, really, I can't." "You've got to," the clerk giggled. "At least let me put it on hold for you. I can do it for, 72 hours? Chris shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe." "Great. I mean, you have nothing to lose. You've got 3 days to decide if you want it. If you come back before then, it'll be here. If you don't, then it'll just go back out on the rack." Well, why not?" decided Chris, and so she followed the sales clerk to the checkout counter and wrote down her name and number. A few minutes later, Chris tucked a claim check in her pocket. "Thanks," said Chris, her voice hushed as she turned to go. "Oh, no problem. I'm sure you're going to come back. It's just too perfect on you." "And I'm sure I won't," thought Chris. No, she'd buy it only if she was going to go to Stuart Hawkins's. But there was no way that she could do that. No. Thank God she'd come to her senses as she made her way toward the main ground floor doors. She saw his face again. Not Stuart Hawkins's warm, charming face, but that of the cop, and his look of horror just before the gun went off. Oh, God, he was dead and buried, all because of her. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.